Greetings everyone, thank you for coming to my channel. In this video, you'll be learning about modal verbs. So what are modal verbs? Modal verbs help other verbs in a sentence while also expressing necessity, ability, possibility, permission, etc. Common modal verbs are can, could, shall, should, might, will, would, must, may, and might. So I'm going to go over a couple of tips about modal verbs. So tip number 1, modal verbs don't need to match their subject and plural agreement. So for example, they could, I could, we could, you could, he could, and she could. So notice how the form of the modal verb stays the same no matter who the subject is. So another way of saying that would be like, for example, if I say she walks to school, it would be she walks. But if I say they walk to school, it will be walk, not walks. So the verb changes depending on who the subject is. But when it comes to modal verbs, the verb has the same form all the time, no matter who the subject is. So here are some sentence examples where modal verbs don't need to match their subject and plural agreement. Example 1 says she can read. So can is the modal verb, but if we replace she, who is the subject, with they, it would still say they can read. If we replace they, which is the subject, with we, it would still say we can read. So notice how the modal verb would stay the same no matter who is the subject. Example 2 says, I might join the army. So say we replaced I with he, it would say he might join the army. Say we replaced I with they, it would still say they might join the army. So the modal verb is might, and it would stay the same no matter who the subject is. And the same thing goes for example 3, which says, I will cook dinner. So say we replaced I with he, the modal verb will stay the same. Say we replaced I with they, the modal verb would still stay the same. Tip number 2 says modal verbs come before infinitive verbs, and the to is never included. So example 1 says, I am going to school versus I must be at school. Notice how in the sentence, I am going to school, we used to school. But in the sentence, I must be at school, we used the modal verb must, which means we can't use to. So when we use modal verbs, that completely eliminates the to. And example 2 says, I am going to bake cookies versus I will bake cookies. Notice how we use will, which is the modal verb, so we can't use to. Example 3 says they will have to agree on something versus they must agree on something. Tip number 3 says modal verbs are never used alone. They're always used with main verbs. Example 1 says you should brush your teeth twice a day. So should is the modal verb and brush is the main verb. So notice how they're used together. The modal verb is not being used by itself. Example 2 says I can write in cursive. So the modal verb is can and the main verb is write. So notice how they're used together and the modal verb isn't being used by itself. Example 3 says I might drive my car to work. So the modal verb is might and the main verb is drive. Notice how they're being used together. The modal verb isn't being used by itself. There are different categories of modal verbs. The most common categories are possibility, ability, necessity, and permission. And I'll be discussing all of these categories. So our modal verbs of possibility are can, could, might, and may. So example 1 says he could win the election. So this is a possibility. This is something that's possible, and could is the modal verb. Example 2 says she might shave her head. So this is something that's a possibility, something that she could do. So might is the modal verb. Example 3 says, I may go to the concert. So this is something that's a possibility. This is something that I can do. So the modal verb is may. Oh, and I forgot to mention, notice how each sentence also has the main verb. So in the first sentence, could is the modal verb and when is the main verb. In the second sentence, might is the modal verb and shave is the main verb. In the third sentence, may is the modal verb and go is the main verb. Our modal verbs of ability are can and could. So example 1 says he can speak French. He has the ability to speak French. The modal verb is can and the main verb is speak. Example 2 says she can draw portraits of people. So she has the ability to draw portraits of people. The modal verb is can and the main verb is draw. Example 3 says I can see with my eyes closed. So I have the ability to see with my eyes closed. The modal verb is can and the main verb is see. Next, we have our modal verbs of necessity, which are will and must. So example 1 says you must wash your hands after using the restroom. And this is something that's a necessity. This is something that you have to do. So must is the modal verb and wash is the main verb. Example 2 says you must respect your parents. This is something that's a necessity. This is something that you have to do. Well, you don't have to do it, but in this sentence, it's considered a necessity because we use the word must. Okay, so the modal verb is must and the main verb is respect. Example 3 says you will behave yourself in public. So this is something that's a necessity. This is something that you have to do. So the modal verb is will and the main verb is behave. Lastly, we have our modal verbs of permission, can, could, and may. So example 1 says, can I get some candy, please? So I'm asking permission. Can I get the candy? So the modal verb is can, and the main verb is get. Example 2 says, could I borrow your phone? I'm asking permission to borrow your phone. The modal verb is could, and the main verb is borrow. Example 3 says, may I speak with you in private? I'm asking permission to speak with you in private. The modal verb is may, and the main verb is speak. Thank you guys for coming. I hope you found this video informative. If you did find this video informative, please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, or all of the above, and I'll see you next time.